I found the pill bottle on a Tuesday morning, tucked behind my multivitamins in the cabinet above the kitchen sink. It had my name on it. The prescription was from my own doctor, but I had never seen it before in my life. I stood there in my bathrobe, holding it under the light, reading the label 3 times. Sertraline, 100 milligrams. An antidepressant. 30 pills with a refill date from 8 months ago. 8 months. My husband and I had only been married for 14. I set it back exactly where I found it, went to the kitchen table, and sat down with my coffee going cold in my hands. And I thought about every single morning for the past year when I woke up feeling like I was moving through wet cement. Every afternoon when I couldn't remember what I'd said in a conversation 20 minutes earlier. Every evening when I looked in the mirror and didn't quite recognize the woman looking back. I had blamed the stress of the move. I had blamed the new job. I had blamed myself, honestly, because that's what I did back then. I was very good at blaming myself, but I had never been prescribed sertraline. My name is Petra, and I was 29 when I married my husband. His name is not important now. I'll call him what he called himself in our vows. My partner. My person. The one who promised to protect me. That's what makes this so hard to write, even now. Because I loved him. I really did. We met at a work conference in Chicago, 2 years before the wedding. He was charming in that specific way that felt effortless, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and asked follow-up questions and made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. I was a junior account manager at a marketing firm. He was in pharmaceutical sales. We dated long distance for 8 months before he suggested I move to his city. His words, "I want us to stop surviving separately and start living together." I thought that was beautiful. I had it saved in a screenshot for years. I moved to Raleigh in January. We got engaged in April. We were married by October. Looking back, I can see how fast that was. At the time, it felt like certainty. The first year was good, or at least I thought it was. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard. We had a dog, a yellow lab named Biscuit, who slept at the foot of our bed and pressed his nose against the shower door every morning. We had a routine. Friday nights, we'd cook dinner together. Saturday mornings, I'd do the farmer's market run while he handled yard work. Sunday evenings were for meal prep and TV. It felt like the life I'd always wanted. It felt real. The fatigue started around month 4. Not dramatic fatigue, just a creeping fog, the kind that makes you feel like you're always 10 minutes behind everyone else. I'd get to work and realize I couldn't remember driving there. I'd start a sentence and lose it halfway through. My supervisor asked me once, kindly, if I was sleeping okay. I said yes, I wasn't, but I didn't know why. My husband was attentive during that time. He made doctor's appointments for me, which felt loving. He came with me, which felt loving. He spoke on my behalf when I fumbled for words in the exam room, which felt, at the time, like partnership. The doctors ran blood work. Thyroid, B12, iron. Everything came back normal. They suggested stress management. They suggested a sleep study. One of them, the third one we saw together, printed out a pamphlet on anxiety disorders and handed it to me across the desk. My husband put his hand on my knee on the drive home. "We'll figure it out," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." I believed him completely. The pill bottle changed things. Not overnight. I wasn't ready for what it meant yet. But something shifted underneath me, like a floorboard I hadn't known was loose, finally giving way. I didn't confront him. Some new and quiet instinct told me not to. Instead, I started paying attention differently. I watched him make my coffee in the mornings. He always insisted on making it, said it was his way of taking care of me. French press, oat milk, 1 spoon of honey. He'd bring it to me wherever I was in the house, and I would drink it grateful and a little guilty that I wasn't doing more. 3 days after finding the bottle, I poured the coffee down the bathroom sink. I made my own at the office. By Thursday, I woke up and the fog was thinner. Not gone, but thinner. Like a window that had been cleaned on one side. I told him I wasn't sleeping well and wanted to try cutting caffeine. He nodded and said that made sense. That weekend, he started making me herbal tea instead. I poured that down the sink too when he wasn't looking. By the following Tuesday, I drove to work and remembered every single traffic light. I sat in the parking garage for a long time before going inside. I was shaking, but not from cold. Something had been in my coffee. Something had been in it for months. I need to explain something about my husband before I continue, because I think it matters. He was not obviously a bad person. That's the part that nobody tells you about situations like this. The person doing the harm is often the same person who brings you soup when you're sick and stays up late helping you prep for a presentation and cries at the same movies you do. He was funny. He was thoughtful with my family. He remembered my mother's birthday without being reminded. He was, by every external measure, a good husband. That's the architecture of it. That's how it works. The kindness is not incidental. It's structural. It's how the whole thing holds together. I started keeping a journal, not on my phone, which he had access to, on a small spiral notebook I bought at a CVS on my lunch break and kept in my desk drawer at work. I wrote down dates. I wrote down symptoms. I wrote down the days I poured out my coffee and what changed. I wrote down the name on that prescription bottle and the date of the supposed refill, and I sat with the quiet arithmetic of it. Someone had filled a prescription in my name that I had never received. He was in pharmaceutical sales. He knew doctors. He knew the system. I want to be precise here because precision matters. I did not know yet, at this point, what he was doing or why. I only knew that something was wrong, and that I was the only one who could figure it out, and that I had to do it without him knowing I was looking. That is a very specific kind of loneliness. I don't have a better word for it. I called my older sister from the parking lot of a Target 2 weeks later. She lives in Denver and we talk every Sunday, but this wasn't a Sunday call. I told her everything. The bottle, the coffee, the journal, the fog that was lifting. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm going to drive out there." I told her not to. I told her I wasn't ready to do anything yet, that I needed more information, that I didn't want to blow up my life on a theory. She argued. We went back and forth for 20 minutes. Finally, she said, "Okay, but you call me every day, every single day, and if you miss a call, I'm getting in the car." That felt like a lifeline I could hold on to. The next person I told was a friend from college, someone my husband didn't know well, someone who lived across town, someone with a guest bedroom and a dog of her own. I told her I might need a place to stay on short notice. She didn't ask a lot of questions. She said, "I'll keep a key under the mat. You come whenever." I was building a net before I fell. That mattered enormously later. The answer came from a place I didn't expect. My husband had a home office he kept organized and locked, which had never struck me as unusual. He worked from home 2 days a week and handled sensitive client accounts. But 3 months into my investigation, I'm calling it that now because that's what it was, I noticed he'd left it unlocked on a Saturday afternoon while he ran out to pick up hardware from Home Depot. I had maybe 40 minutes. I didn't touch his computer. I knew he'd notice if I moved anything. But I did look at the papers on his desk. Just the ones visible, just what was already out. Most of it was work stuff. Client folders, a pharmaceutical catalog, but there was a folder near the back of the desk that had my name on the tab. Inside was a copy of a life insurance policy, $1 million. Beneficiary, my husband. It had been opened 14 months ago, 2 months before our wedding. There was also a folded piece of paper with handwriting that wasn't his, a list of medications and dosages, and at the top of the list a note that read, "Escalate after month 12 if tolerance builds." I photographed everything with my phone. I left the folder exactly where it was. I walked out of his office, closed the door behind me, went to the kitchen and washed a bowl that didn't need washing until I heard the garage door open. Get everything you needed? I asked. Yep, he said, setting down the bag from Home Depot. You good? Perfect, I said. I'm good. I want to tell you that I called the police that night, that I packed a bag and went to my friend's house and let professionals handle it from there. That's what I wish I had done. That's what I would tell anyone in my position to do. What I actually did was make an appointment with a family law attorney, which took 3 days. And then I sat with what I knew alone for 3 more days after that. And during those 6 days, I kept waking up every morning next to the man who was doing this to me, and I kept pouring my coffee down the drain, and I kept performing a version of myself I no longer was. That kind of performance takes something out of you that doesn't fully come back. I want to be honest about that. The attorney was a woman in her 50s who had a direct manner and a box of tissues on her desk that I appreciated without needing. I showed her the photos. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which I will always be grateful for. When I finished, she said, "Have you reported this to law enforcement?" I said no. She said, "That's the next step. What you have here is evidence of potential criminal poisoning and insurance fraud. This goes beyond family law." She referred me to a colleague who worked closely with the Raleigh Police Department. I had an appointment 2 days later. I brought my journal, the photos, and a timeline I had typed up at work during my lunch break. The detective I met with, a quiet man who took notes in a small spiral notebook almost identical to mine, asked me to do something I hadn't expected. Go home. Keep acting normal. Give them time to verify the prescription fraud and build a case. He said, "I know that's hard, but the stronger the case, the better the outcome." I drove home. I made dinner. My husband asked if I was tired, and I said yes. Just a long week, and he rubbed my shoulders for a few minutes while I stood at the stove, and I thought, I am the best actress who has ever lived, and I hate every second of this. It took 11 days. 11 days from the police meeting to the morning 2 detectives knocked on our front door at 7:15 a.m. on a Wednesday. My husband answered the door in his bathrobe. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched from above. I had been told to stay back, to let them handle it. I watched his face cycle through confusion to recognition, to a kind of cold calculation that I had never seen before, and I realized I was seeing his real face for the first time. Not the face he'd given me, the one underneath. They arrested him for criminal poisoning, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. It turned out the handwriting on that list in his office belonged to a former colleague, someone he'd stayed in contact with who had lost their pharmacy license 3 years earlier. That person cooperated with the investigation in exchange for a reduced charge. The prescription in my name had been filed using a forged doctor's signature and his industry contacts. The sertraline was one of 3 medications. The detectives explained that at low doses, combined with something else, something he'd been adding to my food and coffee, the effect was cumulative sedation. It was slow. It was designed to look like deteriorating mental health. It was, the detective told me quietly, clearly premeditated. The life insurance policy had a 2-year contestability window. He had been approaching the end of it. I sat with that number for a long time. 14 months of marriage. 2 months to go before the policy would have paid without question. He pled not guilty, which I expected. His attorney made arguments about mental health, about stress, about a marriage in trouble. My attorney sat beside me in the courtroom and didn't flinch. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, fraudulent prescription. The judge sentenced him to 22 years without the possibility of early release. The colleague who cooperated received 18 months and lost what remained of his professional license permanently. The insurance company, after the fraud case was adjudicated, offered a civil settlement, not on the policy, which was voided, but for their role in failing to flag suspicious activity on a policy opened in such proximity to a wedding. My attorney handled the negotiation. It covered my legal fees, my therapy, and the cost of moving. I moved back to Chicago. I took Biscuit with me. There are things that stay with you. I want to name a few of them because I think they matter. The fog. I still have mornings where I wake up and spend 10 seconds checking, is my head clear? Am I myself? It gets better. It got a lot better. But for the first 8 months after I stopped being dosed, there were days when I genuinely couldn't tell if what I was feeling was residue or just grief. My therapist said both were real. I believed her. The performance. Those 11 days of acting normal will be with me for the rest of my life. I think about women and men who do that for years, who maintain the performance because they don't have the evidence or the support or the moment of unguarded access to an unlocked office. I think about how many people don't have a sister who drives through the night or a friend with a key under the mat. I think about how close I came to not having those things either. The love. This is the part people want me to skip over, and I understand why. But I won't. I loved him. Whatever he was doing, whatever he intended, I loved the version of him I thought I knew. And that love was real, even if he wasn't. Grief for a relationship that was a lie is still grief. It doesn't untangle neatly. You don't get to return it for something cleaner. What I do have now is something I didn't have before. I know what I feel like when I'm myself. I know the particular quality of my own clarity. I know what my own voice sounds like when nothing is muffling it. That is not nothing. Some days it feels like everything. I'm 31 now. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park with Biscuit and a very demanding houseplant and a coffee maker I operate myself every single morning, and I know exactly what goes into every cup. My sister calls on Sundays. My friend from college came to visit last spring, and we walked along the lakefront for 3 hours and didn't talk about any of it, which was exactly right. I still keep a journal. Not because I'm afraid. I'm not afraid anymore, or not in the same way. I keep it because I learned in those strange and terrible months that writing things down is how I stay tethered to what's true. And I worked too hard to know what's true to ever stop paying attention. If you're reading this, if something in what I've described sounds familiar even around the edges, I want you to hear this. The fog is not you. The fog is not a character flaw or a weakness or evidence that you're broken. The fog is something someone is doing to you. Trust the days when it lifts. Start there.